Hello, everyone. Socks is in quite a noisy mood today. He's quite boisterous because he's apparently been shouting at cats outside and seeing them off the premises. So he might he might start yelling at us. I hope everyone's well. It's Monday morning and I've written my words. I've written 2,000 words and tried to maintain a sense of myself as a confident writer in the world doing my stuff, even though it's quite hard to sometimes. I told a story on Saturday when we were out in Liverpool. A lovely bunch of friends met up in Wallasey, and then we went to Liverpool later, and we went round the charity shops and we sat in cafes and we had lunch and we had tea and we browsed and everything was lovely. Really lovely day. I did find myself telling this story, this anecdote about 22 years ago. Me and Jeremy went to Barcelona. It was a teaching trip with UEA, and I had a few days off and we went to Barcelona, and we went to a cafe called Cafe Miranda in this kind of brick-walled tunnel. Very fancy food and loads of courses coming out. Down the middle of this tunnel, of the kind of main eating room, there was all sorts going on. There was performers in drag, in lycra, and they were juggling. And we watched them, and that was hilarious. And then another course came out. And then the jugglers in lycra were jumping through hoops. There were hoops suspended from the ceiling in this tunnel. I was like, my God, they're juggling, and they're dressed up, and their makeup is immaculate, and they're jumping through hoops now. And then we ate another course. And then they set the hoops on fire. So they were juggling and dressed up and jumping through hoops, and the hoops were on fire, and they were being amazing. Then the main courses came out, and everyone stopped watching the acrobats. The acrobats carried on doing spectacular things, but everyone had seen enough by then. And I told this story, and it's still a great example of an amazing, place to go. But I remember the punchline to the story, which was, even back then, me going, God, that's me. I'm all dragged up and I'm juggling and I'm jumping through hoops and the hoops are on fire. How much more do you want me to do? And I do feel that a bit about my career. How many hoops do you want me to jump through? Anyway, it was a great day out and I was exhausted the next day after going around all these shops and doing all these things and talking and talking. That's the tiring thing. It's not the walking about or the shopping. It's chatting away with really lovely friends. There's loads to catch up with and stories to tell. And it was a gorgeous day as well, which was unusual. This particular bunch of pals, we seem to always hit upon these days, maybe twice a year when we go out for a day out. We always get a brilliant blue sunny day, even if it's January or October. So we're very lucky. Socks was furious that day because we were out for 12 hours away from him. There, look, he's too low down for you to see. Look in the camera again, Socks. I was really, on that day, on that Saturday, I was quite, what's the word? Not careful, that sounds stupid, but I didn't buy so many books. I was more, I'm always discriminating in the books that I buy, but I reined it in, let's say that, and ended up with two by the end of the day, two books that are really nice things. First of all, this kid's book from 1977, a novel by William Steig, a chapter book called Dominic, from this amazing second-hand bookshop in a shopping mall in Lisgard, in Wallasey, where everything was about £1 or £2. And this didn't even come out in the UK. William Steig did the book that Shrek was based on. And somewhere I've got a book of his drawings. Oh, it's not there. Tucked away somewhere. It's a book of his drawings, sketches of people And he's just a wonderful, scratchy artist. He also did one of my all-time favourites, Rotten Island, a picture book about monsters fighting. This is a very gentle book, Dominic, about a dog who sets off walking on an adventure. Dominic sets out on the high road one day, going nowhere in particular. He's just moving along on his way to wherever he gets, to find whatever he finds. And that's plenty. A witch alligator full of advice, the dreaded doomsday gang, an invalid pig who leaves Dominic his fortune, a goose somewhat curiously named Matilda Fox, an elephant who has forgotten, and a host of other engaging characters, all of whom involve Dominic in adventures. And at the end of it all, Dominic finds his life's companion. And it's fitting that this unashamedly old-fashioned story, so full of good things, should end on a high note of happiness achieved. Dominic is a dog of character, and his saga is irresistible. Driving around Wallasey, looking for a parking space in the particular bit where we're going to have lunch, and we found a cafe called Elsie's that was perfect. I was reading to Jeremy from the passenger seat at the beginning of this. Dominic was a lively one, always up to something. One day, more restless than usual, he decided there wasn't enough going on in his neighbourhood to satisfy his need for adventure. He just had to get away. He owned an assortment of hats, which he liked to wear, not for warmth or for shade or to shield from rain, but for their various effects, rakish, dashing, solemn or martial. He packed them together with his precious piccolo and a few other things in a large bandana, which he tied to the end of a stick so it could be carried easily over a shoulder. Too impatient to dash around saying goodbye to everyone, he hammered this note to his door: "Dear friends, I'm leaving in rather a hurry to see more of the world, so I have no time to say goodbye to you individually. I embrace you all and sniff you with love. I don't know when I'll be back, but I will be. Dominic." He locked the door, buried the key, and left home to seek his fortune. That is, to look for whatever it was that was going to happen to him out there in the unknown world. I don't know if you can see the drawings. The tone of it and everything is just gorgeous. Anyway, that was me reading in the front of the car. I think I read better that day than I am today. And later on, I found a copy of this, Ted Hughes's book, Poetry in the Making, which was something I think we used at school. It's him giving examples of poems and then writing about them and then setting kinds of exercises to get you writing at home. And really it was for kids, but of course, like all these things, anybody can do the exercises. In fact, we have to remember how to be the kids we were at school, writing poems about things like animals and the weather and so on, in order to get back to writing freely without adult inhibitions. And most of my creative writing teaching was always about that when I did it, giving people permission not to be the sensible grown-ups that they spent so much of their lives pretending to be. He's got chapters here on animals, writing about people, learning to think, writing about landscape, writing the beginning of a novel. So the whole thing is quite satisfying, I think, as a book. So that was quite good shopping. And I have been buying fewer books, although books arrive in the post all the time. And by the time they come, I've forgotten ordering them, so they feel like kind of magic. Today, the post has just been. 2 books arrived. One of them for me, Terry Nation's Dalek Special from 1979, a book that I had that was given away with all my books when I was away at college. Sold. And they turned up on a market stall in our town, and when I went home, there they all were. I was surprised to find that all the Doctor Who books on this stall belonged to me. Anyway, I haven't had this for years and years, and the reason it's so good, I mean, most of it's Terrence Sticks giving you outlines of Dalek stories on TV. Not so exciting. Although it was exciting in '79 because it meant I was seeing wonderful photos like these from the 60s and 70s for the first time. But half of the book, a third of the book maybe, is a short story by Terry Nation called The Secret Invasion, an original story about Daleks. And I remember reading this so well when I was 9 or 10, in amongst reading all those early, to me, Target books. And they were all Dalek ones, the ones I read first of all, which is strange looking back. But that's the ones I read first, right in the sun. And what was great about this Terry Nation story was that he takes, rather than the Doctor and companions being in it, it's just ordinary kids fighting the Daleks. And it opened up a whole world of possibilities to me. Clearly it was meant to be something longer when he began on this. It's in chapters, and it's only about 30 pages long. Clearly he got fed up and said, oh, just put it in a book with other bits and pieces. I wish it had been a longer book. It begins like this. Chapter 1. The cousins had a marvellous time in London celebrating Danny's birthday. David and his sister Emily had come up from Kent. Danny and his brother Paul had been at Victoria to meet them. They had lunch in a Wimpy bar where Paul bet he could eat enough Wimpies to get his name in the Guinness Book of Records, and all the others said he couldn't, and anyway they couldn't afford it. After that, they'd stood in a long queue to see The Exorcist, only to be turned away at the box office because they were too young. Instead, they went to see Robin Hood, which was terrific. And then they end up in the Underground station, and they're told to leave, and they meet a Dalek in the middle of what they think might be a bomb scare. And they kind of recognise the Daleks. That's what's amazing. It's kind of, at the end of chapter 1. They know what Daleks are. And presumably they know what Daleks are from watching Doctor Who on TV. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But that seemed fascinating to me, that the Daleks were actually invading the real world of kids who went to Wimpy bars on Saturdays. My world, when I was 9 and 10. Anyway, that's the Dalek special, and I'm glad to have a copy of it again. It triggers something in my imagination and my memory. I did write a story for Tales of Terror, which I can't see now, a Doctor Who book that Puffin did. I'm going to dig it out. I might have shown you before. No, it's right down there. A lovely hardback collection for Halloween about 8 years ago that's about ordinary kids on a council estate meeting a Dalek or rebuilding it out of junk that they find. It's a kind of demonic version of E.T., really. That kind of story. That was my, I suppose, the end result of having read this at 9. The other thing is this lovely collection of stories, A Book of Spells by Sarah Maitland from 1987, a wonderful collection of short stories. I never had it in this cover. I had it with a much more colourful cover. Oh, that's quite nice. I had an edition from 1991, I think, and that's the first time I read her. And she became a friend kind of within years of kind of first reading her. And I've read almost everything by Sarah. And my friend Rosie, who was there on Saturday, got me a copy of her most recent book for Christmas, just by pure coincidence. A book about forests and fairy tales, thinking it was just my kind of thing. So I'm going to reciprocate with a copy of this wonderful collection that I've known for all these years. Now, if it had arrived in the post a few days earlier, I could have taken it on our day out and given Rosie, but I'll have to post it in the meantime. If Rosie's watching this, that spoils the surprise. Never mind. I hope you like this. I remember Sarah talking about this because every story is quite different and they go all over different kinds of fairy tales and myths and real life stuff and magical realism. And she said when she was writing it, it was like she was inspired. And if anybody had asked her for a story about an elephant or an amoeba or William the Conqueror, she could have just sat down and done it day after day. And she said it was the most magical feeling. And that kind of magic comes off the page, I think. Somebody at the absolute height of their confidence as a writer. And that's really important. It takes great encouragement to make a writer feel like that. And we all get battered back. Well, some of us get battered back all the time. I think more or less most people do. Others have a luckier time, perhaps. And it's important not to feel too disheartened. It's important to remember that people do get those times when they feel inspired and they feel they can do anything because the world is listening to them. So they can jump through hoops, dressed up as this, that, and the other, while juggling, while the hoop's on fire and people are watching and appreciating. And it's important to remember to rest in the times when people aren't paying attention, or to quietly get on with what you're doing when they're not paying attention. Maybe that's the thing. I know that's the thing. Get on with your work and don't expect people to pay attention all the time. I'm sure that's it. And I'm sure that's how the Book of Spells arrived as well. Through careful and loving dedication to your craft. I'm reading this, Liz Hyder, The 12, a kind of spooky, Susan Cooperish, Alan Garnerish, at times Box of Delights-ish, time travel, fantasy adventure set in 1999 about kids who live in caravans. They're not posh middle-class kids like they often are in these kinds of stories. They're poorer and closer to home for me. And I'm halfway through. That was my Sunday, quietly reading something spooky. So that was good. Somebody new to me as well, a new writer to me, which always makes me happy. Okay, that was Jeremy shouting about lunch being ready. So that's quite a full morning. Hope I've not blethered too much and read too badly or got too maudlin about my own career. I hope not. Anyway, socks as fast as... Oh, he's woken up. Goodbye, everyone, and I'll see you again quite soon. Goodbye. And Rosie, I'm sorry for breaking the surprise about a book of spells, but either I'll see you or I'll post it. Okay, goodbye.